Jai Hind everyone. In today's session, we will be discussing about biomechanics and sports. So these are the content of today's session. First, we'll discuss about the meaning of biomechanics. Then we'll study about the Newton's law of motion and its application in sports. Then we'll discuss about the types of levers and their application in sports. Then we'll discuss about friction in sports, and at last, types of friction. Okay, so let us move with the very first slide. So let us now discuss about what is the meaning of biomechanics. So biomechanics is the science concerned with the analysis of the mechanics of human movement. It explains how and why the human body moves. It is a study of the functions and motion of the mechanical aspects of biological systems. Biomechanics tells us about how our muscles, bones, tendons, and ligaments work together to produce movement. So, biomechanics is the science that concerns with the analysis of mechanics of human movement. It also tells us about how our muscles, bones, tendons, and ligaments work together to produce a movement. Alright, so this was about biomechanics. Let us move further with the next slide. That is Newton's law of motion and its application in sports. So first we'll be discussing about the Newton's law of motion, and then we will be discussing about its application in sports. So what is the first law of motion? The first law of motion or law of inertia postulates that if a body is at rest or moving in a straight line, it will remain at rest or remain moving in the same direction unless it is acted upon by an outside force. So what does Newton's first law states? It states if a body is at rest, it will continue to be at rest, or if a body is moving or an object is moving in a straight line, it will continue to be in a straight line until and unless an external force acts upon it. So this was the first law of motion, which was given by Newton. So now what is the second law? So the second law of motion states that the momentum of a body is equal to the product of its velocity and mass. It also states that the time rate of change of this momentum is equal in both magnitude and direction to the force imposed upon it. Okay, so now let us discuss about Newton's third law of motion, which is also known as law of action and reaction. The third law of motion states that when two bodies interact, the force they apply to each other is equal in magnitude and opposite in direction. Okay, so now let us discuss about its application in sports. So as you can see in the picture, in the first picture you can see there's a ball on the ground, and there's a player who is trying to kick the ball. So initially the ball was at rest, okay, but the kick will act as an external force. Okay, so if the external force won't be acted upon the ball, it would have stayed at rest. But since the ball will be acted upon by an external force, that is a kick, so then the force will be applied and the ball may start moving. Similarly, in the third picture you can see there's a swimmer and there's a person who is walking. So what you are doing is, so you are exerting equal amount of force which is opposite in direction on the ground when you are walking, and when you are in water, like when you are swimming, you are doing the same thing. Okay, so now let us move further with the types of levers and their application in sports. So we have three types of lever: first class lever, second class lever, and third class lever. So we'll be discussing about them one by one. Okay, so the first one is a first class lever, in which the fulcrum is positioned between the effort and the load. Okay, so as you can see in the picture, in the green triangle is the fulcrum, which is also known as the axis. The red one is the load, and the blue one is the effort. Okay, so as you can see in the picture, in the first class lever, the fulcrum will be staying at the center or the middle. Effort and load will be at the corners. So example in sports will be seesaw in gymnastics, okay, and overhead barbell press in weightlifting. Okay, so now let us discuss about the second class lever. So in second class lever, the load is positioned between the effort and the fulcrum. So in the first class, the fulcrum was at the center, but in this second class of lever, the load will be at the center and effort and fulcrum at the edges. Alright, so what are the examples in sports? Calf raises in fitness training and pushing off the starting block in track and field is an example of second class lever which is associated with sports. Okay, so now let us discuss about the third class lever. So in third class lever, the effort is positioned between the fulcrum and the load. So the effort will be at the center and load and fulcrum will be at the edges. So now what are the examples of third class lever in sports? So bicep curls in weightlifting and rowing strokes in rowing sport. Okay, so now let us discuss about friction and sports. So friction is a force resisting the relative motion of solid surfaces, fluid layers and material elements sliding against each other. It generally creates an obstruction to moving objects. It is created whenever two surfaces move or try to move across each other. It opposes the motion of one surface across another surface. Friction depends on the texture of both surfaces and on the amount of contact force pushing the two surfaces together. Okay, so now let us discuss about the types of friction. So basically we have two types of friction. The first one is static and the other one is dynamic or kinetic friction. So the static friction occurs when a body is forced to move along a surface but movement does not start. This friction is present between two or more solid objects that are not moving relative to each other. Without static friction, your feet would slip out and it makes it difficult to walk. So dynamic or kinetic friction occurs when two objects are moving relative to each other and work together. So the dynamic friction is further divided into two parts or two types. The first one is sliding friction and the other one is rolling friction. So what is a sliding friction? It is a kind of friction that acts on the object when it slides or rubs over the surface. It is weaker than static friction. Sliding friction causes wear and tear. Okay. So rolling friction, it is a force that slows down the motion of a rolling object. It acts on the objects when they are rolling over a surface. Okay, so this was about today's session. I hope you have understood well. If you have any doubts and queries, please reach out to me. Thank you.